here we have worksheet 2C, and it starts with a chart. And this chart has been practically all filled out for you in terms of the data, and those values are coming from worksheet A and B. So if you want to check how you did on worksheet B, only some of you have done that though, here's all the missing numbers that you should have come up with. So you can check those side by side to see if you did it correctly. Okay, we're going to fill in the top of this chart, and then we're going to practice our graphing skills. Okay, so as you recall, the scenario is that we had an enormous pile of sand, right? There was 2,500 cubic feet of sand in it, and we need to load it onto a barge. So we're moving it from land onto a boat. You have a bucket loader to transfer the sand. The bucket loader can pick up 5 cubic feet of sand in a bucket. So what did our first column represent, right? That first column sort of represents that X value. What did that represent in terms of labels? You can unmute yourself and chime in. Anybody? Or you can message it through the private chat if you prefer that way.
Is it time?
Not time this time around. It won't be time.
I said buckets.
Buckets, exactly. Good. Okay, this is the number of buckets we're removing. So if you just wrote buckets, that's fine, or number of buckets. And that unit is simply just buckets. Okay, so where do we get that from? That's from when we did worksheet A together, when we defined our X and our Y in the equation. That's where we're coming up with that. Okay, so again, our expression always in the first column will just be X. The second column represents our Y. And so what did we define Y as in worksheet 2A?
XF or FX?
Yes, instead of Y, we said f of X, yes. But what did we define for the labels? Was it apples, oranges?
It was the total sand remaining.
Right, it was the amount of sand remaining. Good. I'm just going to write left because it's smaller. Okay, but the amount of sand left, or just amount of sand remaining, whatever you'd like. And that unit, we are more specific here. It's in cubic feet. Just so you guys know, I'm just going to write on the side here. Cubic feet is the same thing as writing like this, ft to the third, feet cubed, okay? So you can always use that sort of notation. Square feet would be feet to the second, that type of thing. And so that expression, we're not just going to write y or f of x, but that's going to be what comes after the equal sign in my equation. So remember that we had 2,500 cubic feet to start with, and then we subtract 5 cubic feet per bucket. So there's the expression that goes in for that second column. Any questions there? All right, make sure we are paying attention and filling this out. Easy way to first off understand the situation, but also then to get some points for your grade. All right, all the data here is what you came up with on worksheet A and worksheet B. So for 0 buckets, we still have 2,500 cubic feet of sand left. If I take 50 buckets away, we're left with 2,250 cubic feet of sand, and so forth. And 500 buckets left us with no more sand. Notice we did have a problem in worksheet A where we got negative, right? But we're not including it in this chart. So we're looking at from the very beginning to the very end. So when we do our grid, let's see how we do here. For number 1, filling out the variable quantity, remember we always put our x and then our y, or f of x if you want to call it, right? So we said x is going to represent the number of buckets. And y represents the amount of sand. And that was feet cubed or cubic feet. I'm just writing it that way so that there's room that you can see. Okay, now here's what I want everybody to do right now on their own, but don't move on afterwards because we want to check it. I want you to fill in these bounds. So please take a look at what your lowest and highest bound should be for each column. Fill that in and then come up with your interval. Remember our graphs, again, for people that are new, our graphs are always going to have 20 lines. So we always divide by the 20 grid lines, okay? So everybody give that a shot. Let's fill in these 6 missing boxes and then stop there. Let's check them and then we'll move on to the graph, okay? All right, so let's take a look. Good job for those that participated. So for buckets, let's just focus on lower and upper for buckets. What that means is that we look at the first column. So I'm going to circle that. And I look at the lowest number that I just circled in orange and the highest. So the lowest number in orange, and this is nice, it's literally in order. The lowest number is 0. And the highest is 500. So for buckets, our lower bound is 0 and our upper is 500. Then for the second column, that's going to be for sand. So again, let's look at the lowest number. Well, the first number is not the lowest, the last one is. And that is 0 as well. So 0 for amount of sand is our lowest. And the largest value I circled in green is 2,500. So this problem is nicer than last week because we don't have to worry about that negative and figuring out the bounds in terms of negatives. So how do I find our intervals now? We divide. So for buckets, I'm just going to stay with my colors here. For buckets, from 0 to 500 is 500 units. And then we divide that by the amount of grid lines. And 500 divided by 20 gave us 25. And so I would just leave it like that. Okay, 25s are easy to count by, so I would keep it as 25. I wouldn't necessarily round to 30. If you round to 30, is it wrong? No, it will not be wrong. But I would just, I almost think 25s are easier. 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, right? So I would just stick with that. Then in terms of sand, from 0 to 2,500 is 2,500. And we divide that by 20. And that gave us 125. Again, that ends with a nice 5, like 125. That's not bad. So I would probably stick with that. If you rounded that to 130, is that wrong? No, it's not wrong. But I would just stick with what we got because they're nice integer numbers that ends in 5s. Any questions with that? All right, so once you have that copied, I'll leave that there for 30 seconds so that people can make sure they have it. Remember, I'm not hovering over you if you're usually in the classroom, so it's up to you to make sure you're copying. Well, then we're going to move on to the graph. And so again, this one will be a little easier and nicer than last week because we don't have that negative bound, okay? Both start at 0. So that's going to be really helpful. I'm going to make this a little smaller so that the whole thing can fit, and then I'll zoom back in so that it's a little bit more legible for you. Let's label first our axes. So always label and then with the parentheses. This on the bottom is, we said, is X, is number of buckets, which is just buckets. And then up and down is our f of x or our y, which is the amount of sand left. and that was cubic feet, or again, feet cubed. So now we can start labeling our intervals. Like I said, the good news is we start with 0 for both of these. So at the bottom left corner will be 0. And along the x-axis, we said let's count by 25s. And along f of x, or y equals, we said let's count by 125s. So there we have it. I'm going to make it a little smaller so everything shows up, as you can see, but then I'll make it larger when I start plotting so we can see. But any questions at all with labeling? Okay, so once we've labeled, remember, then we go back to our chart where I have those orange and green circles, and we're plotting the ordered pairs. So the first ordered pair I'm going to plot is 0, 2,500. So I'll just use a different color than blue. I'll use dark green. 0, 2,500 is way up top. So this is kind of what's different, is we usually plotted stuff sort of low and then it was increasing. But remember what's happening to that pile of sand? It's decreasing. So we start really high at 0, 2,500, and now we're going to start to decrease. Okay, so everybody go ahead and plot those points, and I'll do it as we go. So 52,250. So 50, it's 2 lines over, 2,250. All right, next one, 100, 2,000. 100, 2,000. And with those first 3 points, I always pause and I look, am I getting a nice linear equation? Is it a straight line so far? Yes, right? It's not going to like bump up and loop around. So far, so good with my data. We'll keep on going. 190, 1,550. 190, 1,550. So that one will be not on an exact point, but close to the 200 mark and a little over 1,500. 200, 1,500. That one's back to being at a nice point. 480, 100. So that one we have to estimate a little bit, right past the 475 and 100. So a little below. 400, 500. And then 500 and 0. All right, so I plotted everything, and if I look at those green points I have, it looks good, right? They all should, if I take a ruler, straight edge, which you guys can all grab your folder for the straight edge. If I connect those, there's no crazy loops or it doesn't dip down and then come back up. It's a nice straight line. So with your straight edge, go ahead and connect those. Remember, I don't have access to one on a tablet, so mine's not going to be perfect, but you guys do, so make sure it's nice and straight. Not terrible, but. Does anyone have any questions with that? Okay, once you have your graph, I'm gonna leave the graph up there. Here's what I want you to do. The rest of it is stuff we've done before. It's approximating. What you need to read carefully, because this is the error that I'm seeing when it came to your test, is you need to read carefully what they're giving you and what you're looking for. So for number 3, everybody look at the screen real quick, and then you can go back to your work. It's saying how many buckets if there's 1,000 cubic feet. Well, since they give you 1,000 cubic feet, that's on the left. So I go over to where I see, and I'll use pink right here. I go over to where I see 1,000 on the left because that's what they're giving us. And we're going to take that and we're going to go and see where I find that on my green line. Then from there, I go down to where that would be on my x-axis. Okay, so I'll let you do that on your own. If they give you the buckets, then you start down low and then you go up. Okay, so let's have everybody practice that now. I'll leave the screen up here in case you don't want to flip back and forth between your graph and the questions. I'll make this a little bit larger, but again, to fit everything, there we go. All right, you can look at this way. But everybody be working on that last page. Okay, go ahead. I'm going to give you guys some time. Remember, we're not leaving at 11:18. So everybody go ahead and work, and then we will check those answers. Go for it. If you have questions, let me know. All right, I'm checking in just to see your progress so far. So what did, and let's hear from a variety of folks. It's okay if you're wrong, remember, right? It's good practice to just try. So with that 1,000 cubic feet, who can tell me what you said for number of buckets? Again, it's an approximation.
I said about 300 buckets of sand were removed.
About 300 buckets. Sure. Did anyone say anything different? Because it's okay to. Anywhere around that 300 mark is great. So if you said a little bit below, like you said 280, 290, or you said 310, a little above, that's okay. All right, but sure, let's write that. So approximately how many buckets of sand were moved? There were approximately 300. Wait, 300 you said, right, Tim? Good. Okay. Our next one is saying, again, cubic feet. So it says 200. So on my graph, I'm sticking with that left-hand side. I'm going to go to 200. Well, what's 200 closer to? 250 or 125? slightly closer to 250. So somewhere right here where I'm putting a little tick mark. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to go over to where that hits my green line. So I'm going to say something like here. So I would say somewhere around 450, maybe a little over, 460. What did others say? Anyone have another answer? Lots of participation, which is good. I'm seeing probably about half and half, getting it close and getting confused. But I want to give people some more time, and then we will talk about it. Okay, so everybody look at the screen because either I'm not getting participation, which means you don't know what you're doing maybe, or a lot of incorrect answers. I have about 5 people who definitely know what they're doing here though, so great job. So again, it says 350 buckets. So I'm going over to 350 on my x-axis where I have a star. From that star, I go up until I hit my green line. So here I am. Watch the screen, right? Here's my orange line. I'm going up until I hit that green line. Bingo. Look at this big bolded orange. I'm making it bigger than it needs to be. But that big bolded orange point is where I hit the green line. So how do I determine what that means in terms of sand? Well, sand is on the left. So now watch the cursor. It's moving over to the left and about here. So what does that number represent? It's really close to 750. So your answer should be around 750. Maybe a little bit below, but notice it's not close to the 625. It's much closer to the 750. So I would say, give or take, 750, 740. If you had said 700, it wouldn't have been terrible, okay? But certainly we don't want to go too low or too high. Around that 750 mark is what our answer should be, okay? So if I go back, well, it's not going to let me right now. Let me pause. Let me write this answer, and then I'll just check in with folks. So there will be about, I'll say 740 cubic feet of sand left. Okay.